to start us all off, so this is a webinar about Web 3.0 and its relation to DLT and Metaverse. As we can imagine, Web 3.0 is a lot more than just that, but we're specifically focusing on that because those are just really large industries and only getting bigger by the day. So we kind of started off the web with Web 1.0. That's the static web, quite decentralized because no one really understood how it would work and how it would really evolve. But it was very uninteractive, right? So it was a lot of people publishing content, but you really couldn't interact with it. What you see is what you get. But where we are now is Web 2.0, the interactive web, and it's highly centralized, but highly interactive. It has everything from blogging to social media to e-commerce and everything else, gaming included. So it's super big, but also super centralized. So us, the users, don't really have that much of a say in its overall direction. We can only control things within the confines of, what the corps would let us do. But Web 3.0, which is what we're building towards right now, I mean, cryptocurrency's been around for a while, and so has the idea of metaverse and just decentralization as a whole. It's basically something that we will decide, and that's what we're going to be talking about mainly today. How are the creators and the doers of today going to shape our future? So as Charles Dickson said, we are now at the beginning of the Web 3.0 era, which combines the decentralized community-governed ethos of Web 1 with the enhanced modern functionality of Web 2. Web 3 is the internet owned by the builders and users, orchestrated with tokens. I think that's a pretty cool quote. But, actually, I wouldn't say orchestrated with tokens very specifically. I would actually just say DeFi in general. There's just so many flavors and ways that it comes in. I wouldn't say just tokens, but yeah. So today we have Sammy, or Vinci, and she's a music producer, visual artist, and a metaverse being, as we can see. Would you like to say a few words about yourself and introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, everyone. I'm Vinci, and I'm this multimedia artist creating IP and content in the metaverse and interacting with the community.
Awesomeness. You look so cool. I just love the VTuber thing. It's amazing, and it's so sci-fi.
Thank you so much.
And then we have Krista Kim. She's a digital artist responsible for the Continuum tour. I saw that. That is so awesome. Well, not physically, but yeah. And an NFT artist. And one of your creations, I believe, sold for over 500,000. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, back in March of 2020, I sold the Mars House. The Mars House is a metaverse house. It was the first metaverse house that was sold in the world.
Wow.
So yeah, and ever since then, it's been quite a ride.
That is crazy. And I really like the Continuum tour. It just looks so nice. It's got the really nice chill vibe going on. I didn't know you were behind that. That's actually really awesome. So yeah.
Tours, like what it's all about, showing how the power of the artistic intention of creation through digital can really change our world. And so I demonstrated that in Times Square, where this is a place of hyper commercialism. It is the center of the world in that sense, with hundreds of screens. So I basically repurposed those screens for meditativeness and healing, which is the core of my practice. And so every night in February for 3 minutes at midnight, there was a moment of breathing. There was a moment of meditativeness through my art. And I believe that we can create those experiences in the metaverse, and that the metaverse can be a space of mindfulness, of real sort of meditative culture, and actually culture, period. We could actually create a lot of meaningful experiences for our communities there.
Gosh, there's going to be so many cultures in the metaverse, right? Because it's like the collection of everything and everyone's creations, such as this. And I really love it. Yeah, I think it will be a great place for self-reflection. And then finally, we have Pico. You are an architect and also a digital architect, so physical and digital. Would you like to tell us more about that? Like some of the
Yeah.
things that you've done?
So I started off with physical architecture, working on mega projects like the Google headquarters for Cirque du Soleil, Hard Rock Casino and Hotel. And then I transitioned into what we call multimedia architecture. So a lot of projection mapping and using different digital mediums to create portals from the physical to the virtual. Then I got into video game design, doing the MMO Superforest. And essentially, all of this started converging into the integration of these two worlds, which is now the space that I'm in, let's say, which is bridging the physical and the virtual through the metaverse and through physical experiences.
Awesome. I think that's really cool that you're using your architecture talent in the physical world to also influence our graduation, I guess, to the digital. So I think that's really, really cool. And yeah, and I saw that the Google headquarters thing. I was like, wow, that is huge. It was awesome. So yeah, I think it's really awesome to have you guys here, so we can actually talk about this topic and kind of just go over what we think the future will be like for it. And I can't really think of better people to have here today to talk about it, because you guys are actually doing things in the space, right? You're not just talking about it, you're actually doing. You're a part of it. So, kind of like founders of the future. So I think it's perfect. So I'm going to start us off with a pretty general question to get your opinions on it, and we'll just go around the room from top to bottom. So Web 3.0 and metaverse are quite popular, but somewhat undefined terms. What do the terms Web 3.0 and metaverse mean to you? So let's start off with Vinci or Sammy.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, look, like even though metaverse was coined by Neil Stephenson from Snow Crash, we're so in the nascent beginning stage that like it is really hard to pin down and define what is a metaverse, because it's like asking back then like what's the internet, and everyone has
Impossible,
different
right?
opinions. But to me, it's like this persistent shared experience that's the convergence of the physical and the digital realms, and having this open metaverse system where we have this shared economy of joint value creation.
Now that's a nice summary of it. Okay, so Pico, what are your thoughts?
I like that joint value creation. I would just add that it's spatial, right? That's one of the biggest things compared to Web 2. The fact that you're able to experience it in the spatial environment, which is essentially giving it an extra dimension that we're not used to. And VR was the first version of this gaming as well, because you can move around the space. You have the freedom to move around an environment. And I think what's really important about that is that once you give an extra dimension to a medium, you're essentially changing everything from narrative to data collection to interaction to even like social behaviors inside of it. So I think what's going to be really fun is really understanding what does it mean to have this extra dimension, and how will everything change because of it.
Yeah, it's quite unknown, isn't it? Right? We just see that there's a whole lot of new variables, but we don't know how it's going to add up. So Krista, what do you think?
Well, Sammy and Pico really, I really agree with everything they're saying, and it's a wonderful opportunity for the next frontier of human civilization. I really believe that people really have to start reframing the focus of who they are, in the metaverse, where brands and artists, we really have to start thinking ourselves as communities. And when you're thinking about building metaverse worlds, you're building literally new civilizations, right? So it takes a lot of community collaboration, co-creation, and it's a spiritual exercise, because you're involving people, and you have to ask yourself, when you build a metaverse, who am I, and what value can I bring into my community as I activate them into the metaverse through beautiful immersive experiences. So everything is experiential, and an experiential expression of who you are that brings value to people's lives. And it must be decentralized, open, and interoperable in order to uphold our current values of democracy and free will. It's only under those pretenses that we can continue that tradition of what we've created in our real world, which is democracy and the right of the individual.
Oh gosh, I agree so much. And it's really cool that you touched on like the self, right? The individual and how that goes into the experience, because it really ultimately is us, how we perceive it is what shapes it and what shapes these cultures. So it's really cool that you're thinking about it that way. And it's the perfect segue into the next question, which is about self-ownership, right? Of one's experience. Their identity is important to maintain privacy and prevent censorship. So how might DLT, like NFTs and blockchain, impact metaverse in this regard, like in regards to identity, individualism, your right to express yourself as you are truly. Vinci, would you like to start us off with that?
Yeah, sure. So establishing this new digital trust layer, I associate with self-sovereign identity, and to me, that's like it's having the privacy of your and the control of your own data, and being able to have that interoperability to take, you could have several different avatar, public skin identities, and take that between different virtual worlds alongside, your NFTs assets. So yeah, NFTs are a strong component of the metaverse on the blockchain, and it's connected to your identity, to your culture, and to your self-sovereign identity.
I like it. Krista, what do you think?
Yeah, well, definitely I agree with Sammy. We basically are entering a period where the technology exists where we can actually capture. We have a cachement of all of our data because data is power. And every action that we have in the digital world, it emits data. And so the data is part of us. I am my data. My data is me. And so we must start to understand this paradigm shift into, data as power, data as currency. And we must be able to, have custody over our own data and tokenize it so that we can actually give permission to other parties to monetize from it, to use it for whatever purposes, research, whatever. But we must be remunerated for that. We can't just freely give our data away in the surveillance capitalist system of Web 2, to major companies to have their way with it without permission, without remuneration. And so I think that this is the next frontier of human rights, which is data sovereignty, this whole issue. And eventually what will happen is there will become a system that's on the blockchain through AI nodes that actually holds our data, stores our data for our own self-custody so that we can control. But our data will be everything. It will be all of our assets that are digital, and it'll be everything about us, all of our actions, everything we've done, a whole record of our lives.
Wow. So basically, to summarize that, like it's moving our identity from the data centers, from the control of, the corps and the big governments back home, back to us, right? So we hand it out.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Pico, what do you think about that?
Well, it's difficult to add to that. It seems like it was very comprehensive. I would just say that what's going to be super interesting as well is that we're going to have layers of data, right? We're going to have things that are because we're going to have so much control over our identity and all the information that is attached to our identity. There's going to be different layers of how people access that, and I think that's super interesting to think that it's not going to be just like one single way that we showcase our data, or that we showcase our identity, which is how we do it right now through social media or through every other application, which is it's always me and everything is public. But there's going to be a lot of different layers that are going to be from private to public, depending on the situation or depending on the environment, which I think is another level of complexity that we're not used to.
You are completely right about that. Actually, on social media, trying to kind of cater to privacy, I've noticed that they have a lot of like options. You want to show this to friends, friends of friends, public, and then, yeah, that's going to get very complicated, isn't it? Especially as we have more and more data and we spend more and more time in the virtual worlds. Like, how the heck are we going to manage all that? So, I imagine there's going to be a lot of software solutions out there to help us manage it. So that's going to be a huge market, right? So cryptocurrency has fundamentally always been money by the people for the people. But big money and banking interests seem to be slowly moving their way into highly regulating and controlling the space, just like they do for current money markets, the central banks, and just general traditional finance. So do we think that DLT and cryptocurrency will survive? Will it remain something for the people, or will it be kind of corrupted over time? And if so, how long will that take? So what do you think about that, Pico?
I think more than surviving, cryptocurrency is consistently evolving, right? Like we started with Bitcoin, then Ethereum, now Ethereum 2.0 is coming, then Solana, like all these different versions that are consistently trying to optimize and be more efficient to what people need, depending on what it is, the purpose of the cryptocurrency, especially with NFTs, that became like a very important layer into these currencies. But essentially, there's no turning back. Like it's only just going to continue to evolve. And as we can see right now, especially with what's happening in Ukraine, the fact that people can own their own money regardless of where it's being placed, it's like not depending on banks, but really having full ownership of their assets and their their savings in any part of the world. I think that's what shows like the importance of not having anything in a centralized system. I mean, that's in terms of banks, but I think in terms of data, I remember maybe like last year, there was a day that Facebook was down for one day. Imagine if our entire economy was inside of a centralized platform, how bad that could have been, like the effect of something like that. So I think essentially there is going to be a continuous evolution, but there's no turning back. And even centralized banks are trying to see how they get into crypto. So I think it's more about integration and trying to educate people to understand crypto more instead of it being for the crypto natives. And we can see this even with like credit card rewards that give you crypto back instead of cash back, right? So it's all about just trying to educate people and bring them into the system.
So like basically the constant evolution is kind of our protection, that it moves so fast and it evolves so fast with so many people developing and working on it that it's just bound to survive in the way that it was originally intended, which is, for us, right, to protect our interests as people, as individuals. Okay, so Krista, what are your thoughts?
I believe that I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm not a maximalist. But I do believe in the power of Bitcoin as an apex currency that will eventually become the world currency, only because economics and central banks and the way that fiat currencies are managed, it's so badly managed and it's such a corrupted system that it's inevitably going to fail. Overprinting of currencies and causing inflation, and of course, the system itself is so archaic. It no longer serves the people. And so I believe that the crypto revolution is happening. It's very early in the stage of adoption, but the network effect is happening. And I have no doubt that we will be making every single transaction between human beings, either in NFTs or in cryptocurrencies, to pay for things. It's just inevitable because the old system is falling apart slowly.
Yeah. We do have a pretty tough but bright future ahead, don't we? And it's really cool that you think that Bitcoin will be like basically the world reserve currency almost. That's kind of cool. I've heard that a lot from a lot of people. It's not utility value strictly speaking, but just the economics of how it goes into it. It's just number one, so people naturally base themselves around it. So yeah, it is really interesting to see how it will evolve. Okay, so our next question, Sammy, you should start us off on this one. Are you working on or working with anyone that is helping to push forward the principles of Web3's self-ownership in a fundamental way? So things that we've kind of discussed so far.
That's a great question. I mean, firstly, I'm very much like in this community and respecting a lot of these projects that are doing this. Like I'm following the Crucible project, and they're working on the Emergence SDK, which is directly tackling the SSI thing and the Open Meta DAO. In terms of the Vinci project, I'm coming from a very multimedia creative storytelling perspective. So in terms of how we create value, joint value creation with the community, I'm looking for new ways creatively to branch out and create these co-creation stories with metaverse native IP, and that directly relates with PFPs, virtual real estate, multimedia content, in-game experiences, and forming our own stories in the metaverse, and directly relating that to the values that we all relate with, which is, joint value creation, open metaverse, and letting that reflect through the story as a medium for creation.
Yeah, I really agree, because what you're doing is mainly taking the ideas that we all share and bringing it to the masses, right? Like, you are media, you are marketing for the values that we're trying to push fundamentally and technologically. So you really bring that idea to everyone that otherwise may not have actually heard about it. So I think that's pretty awesome. So Christo, what are some of the things that you're working on with regards to Web 3.0?
Well, I'm currently a member of a couple of DAOs. DAOs related to an open metaverse, building an open metaverse, the WTF DAO, NFT WTF, or was it WTF NFT? Yeah, I think that's how it goes.
Okay.
Oh, it's basically organized by Jamie Berksey of Outlier Ventures, and so we basically have created a group where we basically invest, or we put efforts towards promoting an open metaverse, interoperable metaverse. The other DAO that I'm getting involved with is not yet launched. It's we are going to mint our DAO tokens April 1st. And that will also be involved in building the metaverse that we want to see. So I'm really active in the DAO scene, and I think the DAOs are really transformative in our, I think it's going to replace corporations and governments eventually, and schools and all kinds of organizations. I think that we will basically, not in this generation, but I would say within a metaverse native generation coming up 3 generations from now, I think DAOs are going to be the main structure of, human organization, whether it's economic or political, what have you. So I believe that DAOs are truly the future and a great opportunity.
I really like that. Yeah, DAOs are really cool because they consist of all of us, just like any other organization traditionally, but the enforcer of it isn't even human, right? It's code. So I think that's really cool, right? Because then it doesn't really have any bias anymore. It just exists and just enforces exactly what we as members of the organization put in there. So it just works. So I think that's really cool, and actually something that I think people might have to get a little bit used to, because they're kind of used to humans orchestrating everything. So if there was like a mistake or some difference would be needed, a human would intervene and kind of change it. But with regards to DAOs and DeFi, once you press go, it's done. It's done. It just happens. So that's actually something to get used to, I think. So Pico, what are some of the things that you're working on with regards to Web 3.0, or some of the people that you work with regards to Web 3.0?
Yeah, so I've been working more on the metaverse build out for a lot of different companies, institutions. Some of them are individuals as well, but essentially helping people understand what the space is and how they can create a presence inside of it. So my clients include soccer leagues or sports leagues, museums, educational institutions, chefs, comedians. It's a luxury brands. There's just a large range of people that want to understand the space, and it's mostly asking the question of how it's not about translating what already exists in the physical world into the virtual. The digital double is something that a lot of people try try to go that route because it's simple, right? It's like if you have a stadium here, just put the stadium in there. If you have an interaction here, just do the same there. But essentially, the questions that we need to ask ourselves is what were the reasons why that was designed that way, and do those reasons still exist within the virtual world? And I think what's super interesting about that is that we realize that we haven't allowed a lot of these programmings or typologies in general to evolve because the physical space is very complicated, it's complex, it's expensive, it takes time to build, right? So if you look, for example, at the theater from the proscenium theater didn't evolve for a very long time, and it still to this day isn't like, it's still the predominant type of theater for like 3,000, 4,000 years old. But when you go to shows like Sleep No More, for example, it really starts questioning what does it mean to be inside of the show instead of looking at it? And I think that type of question is something that we should be asking in terms of how do museums act? What are our educational institutions like? What is culture and like culture, entertainment, arts in general? How could they evolve within this space in a way that that is more tailored to the user, and that gives people a better experience? And I think the also a very big part is because of blockchain and NFTs, it's also changing the way, like the whole economic model around it. So thinking that museums no longer need to, if they desire, no longer need to have a philanthropic model, right? Like the business model that they hold tends to be very very heavy on the philanthropic. Then there's a part that's ticket sales, but essentially it's all supported by a very small group of individuals. So what would it mean to be able to open that, whether it's through fractionalized ownership or through different types of NFTs, to like really change the way that museums exist, or really change the way that they've been supported to this date? So with every client, that's kind of like the questions that we ask.
I think it's actually really awesome that you're thinking about it that way, and I really think a lot more people, studios, developers, I need to think about it that way, because everyone's trying to hop in on the latest and greatest, right? Metaverse. But what does that mean? The first thing that they jump to, right, is, as you said, they want to replicate the physical in the virtual, and they're like, oh, it's done. But I'm like, that's just a gimmick, isn't it? We don't have the physical limitations of the real world. We don't need to make you walk like thousands of feet across the shopping mall to get from one end to the other. We can do something new. We can do something that's not with those limitations. But when you give someone a blank canvas, their mind kind of just goes blank, unless they're like the artist type, right? So people like you guys kind of have to help them. You have to come up with ideas and explain to them, okay, we don't have to take the physical limitations here, but what are some of the virtual possibilities, and what would actually be fun, what would actually make sense? So I think there's like two steps to that. We have to break people out of their like current thinking, and then also give them a better solution, both very difficult. So I think it's really cool that you touched on that, because I think it's actually a much bigger problem than most people realize. You know, a lot of people just get into it and they just think, oh yeah, let's just copy the real world. And it's like, no, that's not what this is for. We can do so much more. Like Vinci and I, like having our avatars, we don't need to look like our real selves. We could, and a lot of people do, but you can be anything you want to be, right? So I think that's like a perfect example of doing things differently. So it's really awesome that you're thinking about it that way and influencing organizations of every type in that direction. So Sammy, how do we envision AI and virtual worlds coming together? How might that impact our relationships and our lives as a whole? I feel like this is just a perfect question for you, being a virtual being and all.
Yes, it's an interesting dynamic, especially fictionally in my novel. I'm written Vinci as this super sentient AI, of which I have no idea what that really entails. It's all purely hypothetical and a fun, creative exploration. Nevertheless, in reality, the relationship between AI and these virtual worlds, it's going to be a very interesting thing to follow, because I strongly believe that it won't just be humans that will be building the metaverse. It'll be AI as well. And you know, it's almost like we have to come up with regulations and talk about AI ethics, in the sense of how do we like bias AI to positively influence the metaverse, not negatively. and create these systems where humanity is put at the forefront for these experiences. So AI is going to be used in multiple ways. I've been even following things like Altered State Machine. They did something really cool with the Fluff World, which is an NFT project. And they have these like INFTs, like these intelligent NFTs where they put like these, artificial brains in these avatars, and they, through reinforcement learning, they're persistently learning and interacting in these shared virtual spaces. So I think what's also going to be really interesting is identity with avatars. So we might have our human-driven avatars in the metaverse, as well as these NPC versions. So, I mean, the thing about humans being biological, we're not going to be awake all the time. We're going to go to sleep. We're not going to always be engaging in these virtual worlds. So will we have AI copies that will also be engaging, and how do we set those parameters and rules, and be wary of deep fakes, and and also I think this relates to self-sovereign identity. Obviously, zero knowledge proof, but we know it's proof of humanity. So like, how do we know we're engaging with an AI or a human in the metaverse? So much so, like when we're on a website with a chatbot, like we almost like passes the Turing test, or maybe does pass the Turing test. Like we almost forget we're talking to this narrow AI. So take that to the spatial world. It'd be very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's quite crazy. Do we really know where it's going to end up, actually? Because the code is just so powerful, and I think it surprises everyone, right? Even the creators, what they end up doing and just how powerful they end up being. So, Krista, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, Sammy's absolutely right. I agree with her. And I think that AI is such a powerful technology, and the metaverse itself is a very powerful, immersive technology where, within 5 years, we can experience, seamless transitions between we'll have an XR lifestyle between VR in real life, AR, and the hardware will be so advanced where, the fidelity of our digital layer will become nearly indistinguishable from real life. So this is extremely powerful in terms of the presentation, the interface, and the experience, the immersion. And then, of course, with AI, it's the most powerful technology that we've ever encountered. So there is a great responsibility right now at the real nascent stage of the development of these projects, that yes, everything should be for humanity first. There should be a strong ethics code where we are not exploiting people as product, that we are giving people self-custody. We're allowing people to operate as sovereign beings, and that we are not using the technology in an evil way, let's say. It should be for good, because we do a lot of good in the world with this technology. I mean, when you think about the immortalization of the human species into the metaverse, this is going to happen. We're all going to be immortalized, and everything we do, our culture, will be immortalized. So the possibilities of where we will what heights we will reach in terms of the digital consciousness, uploading consciousness into the metaverse eventually. I mean, all of these technologies are coming, so we have to start with the right foundation.
You are 100% correct. It's going to be crazy out there. And I don't know if we know really fully what to expect on that front. But yeah, you're right. Even so far as uploading our consciousness, like, gosh, I don't even think we understand it now. But what if AI actually figures out what is consciousness, like, fully before we do? So it really feels like it's out of our hands, isn't it? It's going to be out of our hands. It's the longer we keep on this road. So I really question if we'll ever even be able to control it, like, truly, like we're the creators, but I feel like our children are just going to outgrow us, and what's going to happen? I have no idea. But it's very exciting because it's not all bad, right? Good things can happen too. We always jump to the pessimistic thought first, which I don't think that's a good habit to do, right? We have to be optimistic towards the future when we're pushing so hard day in, day out. So Pico, where are we on the road to AR, VR, and metaverse as a whole? And where do we see it in 5 years? And what about 10 years?
So first, I just wanted to like add something to the previous question, which
Sure.
is essentially when we talk about how much we can control, it's almost thinking about it as there's two parts, right? There's like the design of the framework, and then that's like the organic evolution of how that framework will change based on data and interaction, right? So I think it's not about trying to control the final outcome, but just being able to set those frameworks that align with our human desires and our ethics, etc., and then letting it organically create itself, right? But in terms of the question for what was it, AR, XR?
Just the future, like so where are we on the roadmap, like right now, 2022, but 5 years from now and 10 years from now, where do you imagine we'll be? What will this look like? What would it be like for us?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to tell because when we talk about AR, VR, etc., like these technologies have been around for more than a decade, right? Like you remember Google Glass, like all these products that were coming in early, but there just wasn't any content for it to have that much value. So what we're seeing is that the content is evolving just as much as the hardware, which I think is essentially where the intersection lies, right? Because we have two different parts, which is we have of course, like the physical and the digital, but then what's the essence? It's going to be, how do you create that intersection, or how do you create that portal between them, right? And the thing that we use the most for that right now are just our screens, our computer, and our phone. But essentially, when we're able to use wearables, whether it's glasses or it's contact lenses, then that integration starts becoming more seamless, right? So it's going to be like a two-way road, which is the technology, the hardware, software has to evolve, but then also the content has to be valuable enough for people to want to use it.
I like the chicken and the egg problem. Very, very difficult. But with companies like Apple and just big marketing giants, I feel like they'll be able to pull it off, right? Because this is not the first time that we've had to like bootstrap ecosystems, right? The smartphone and the internet kind of evolved on its own, but the smartphone, I think it was a pretty coordinated push because we've had that tech for decades, right? Little PDAs, but Apple managed to just assemble it in such a way that everyone was like, "Holy shit, this is the future!" So it's huge. Now everyone owns one, like everyone, right? So I think the brightest minds and the largest organizations might very well be able to like come up with some of the tools and the solutions to make this happen and faster. It's kind of inevitable, right? So Krista, just the roadmap for AR, VR, and metaverse as a whole. So like, what do you think? Like, where are we at, current year, but where will we be 5 to 10 years from now as well, in your opinion?
So basically, the first generation of metaverse platforms have been gaming platforms that have been now sort of pivoted into metaverse, or as just naming themselves as metaverse platforms, like Sandbox, Decentraland, and these cryptovoxels, these first movers in the space that are from the gaming world. I think now what's evolving are high fidelity, it's more involving gamification, but high fidelity platforms that allow you to build on Unity. And I think Unity is basically becoming, the software that will actually develop the metaverse in terms
Unity
of
3D.
Pardon me.
The engine, the game engine.
Yes. Engine, because there was a head-to-head competition between Unreal Engine and Unity in the space, and through my research and through my own projects, it was my partner and I, Peter Martin, we were really researching the landscape of metaverse and trying to figure out. It's such an early space, right? People are building the next generation of platforms now as we speak. But right now, I think that the high fidelity platforms we've built on Unity, and you will have the ability to use multiple devices, mobile, browser, and VR headsets. But the next after this high fidelity sort of experience in VR is the next step. But after that, we're going to have augmented reality brought to a next level when it's on headsets. So
Mhm.
when the Apple glasses come out, or when somebody comes out with a really high fidelity AR glasses, that actually look good, that people would wear en masse,
Yeah.
then you're going to have another complete shift in global culture. It's going to change the world, just as the smartphone did. So once AR glasses hit the scene, you're going to see digital fashion become $1 trillion industry. And you're going to
Mhm.
see architecture, design, all kinds of like art, everything is going to shift because art will be a digital layer that is just basically part of our everyday lifestyle. And so this is the future, and it's coming soon. It's a question of the hardware. So we're always waiting for the hardware to catch up with
Yeah.
the ideas and the concepts that will come, because there's already ideas and programming that's geared for this, but we're waiting for the hardware to come.
Got you, got you. Don't you feel like it's like a waiting game between both, though, right? Like just not only hardware but also software. Like we have the tools, we have so many tools, but it's not always assembled in all the right ways to really get us to take full advantage of what we even have now, right?
Mhm. There are many moving parts. There is that, and there's also the skill set of the creators too. Like there aren't many creators that are metaverse builders, world builders, right?
Yeah.
So that it's all we're all very much building the plane as we fly it. So, but it's an exciting place to be. We're really truly at the forefront. So, I would say within the next 5 years, you're going to see a lot of developments in the space because so much capital is being poured into it. So, we'll see a lot of changes, a lot of amazing developments.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of passion as well. So there's the money, but then we need to people to be super, super passionate about all of it. Um, and so I guess when we have the union of the two, where we have the resources and then the drive, it forms that thing that really surprises everyone. But I thought it was really funny how you mentioned like building the plane as we fly it, and I'm like, oh gosh, it sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. But hey, it's not the first time we've done it, right? So it's all good. So Vinci, what do you think? What do you think about where we are and where we're going?
Oh, such a great question. I mean, yeah, like I just even just using myself right now as an example, like I'm streaming live right now from Unreal Engine, and I feel like I'm pushing the capabilities of my computer as we speak as an individual content creator. So, long
Are
story
you gonna
short, the
fight
metaverse is
Krista?
not, yeah, the metaverse is not there yet.
Unity Unreal.
Yeah, exactly. But pixel streaming exists, which companies are doing for that high fidelity, high poly streaming from UE with the cloud. But that being said, like I do believe XR is the future, and no one wants to be siloed just into virtual reality, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That being said, like there's beauty in virtual reality for complete world building where you can defy physics and create completely imaginative experiences. But AR has been around, as we know, for a while. But with smart glasses, I think our day-to-day lives will be very different because I can imagine walking down the street and seeing this digital overlay of the physical world, and rather than static information, we're seeing real-time dynamic information and object recognition. And so that could be a very beautiful and a scary place. And so that's why having these conversations up front now, that the fear could be like, if you wanted to curate your own experience, the downside could be a filtration bubble where you only see what you want to see out of the AR glasses and you lose that sense of
Yeah.
organic discoverability. But then the beautiful side is like, you can see a whole new dimension that is beautified and makes life more beautiful. And can you imagine for like the hearing or vision impaired, like so the hearing impaired, seeing like dynamic information, as they're walking down the street. Like there's so many opportunities to think now about how we can make the world more of a beautiful and a place for everyone.
That is absolutely lovely, and you're right about the discoverability. Will people really try to style themselves away? But what's really interesting about human nature is that we are always excited to be surprised. When everything's exactly the way we want it, don't we get really super bored and we get really anxious? And we're like, oh no, this isn't good enough. So maybe I feel like when people can tailor their experiences for them, they'll start doing that to be perfect exactly the way they want it. Then they'll get bored, and then they're going to be like, oh, I want to be surprised. I want to be wowed. I want to have a couple things I actually don't like in there, to kind of create some challenges, something to overcome. So maybe it goes in stages, right? The evolution of the culture of everyone, of just the whole world with this technology. So yeah, Pico, if you had $100 million right now, no strings attached, what sort of project would you like to bootstrap?
Um,
I know, crazy question, right?
yeah. Let's see. I mean, there's a lot of projects that I would love to build, but I would say that even if education is not the core of my strengths or what I've been known for doing as an architect, I would really like to rethink what is education for the world and how the metaverse can be a large component in this. Not only in terms of experience, in terms of how do you create content that is like affordable and accessible to everyone in the world, but I can imagine just like an Ivy League DAO that opens their information to the entire world, and how we can really just like literally change the world by giving everyone access. So I think that if I had $100 million, I would try to disrupt the educational system through the metaverse.
I like that. Didn't even expect that, but I really like that because everything starts with education, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, Krista, what do you think? If we gave you $100 million, other than super yachts and everything else, what would you like to build? What would you like to work on?
I actually never would buy a super yacht myself, but anyway, I think that I'm actually building a platform, and the platform is centered around creating these high fidelity projects that that elevates humanity. And
Yeah.
to Pico's point, it's wonderful that we can create experiences that actually enhance education, health and wellness, and culture. So if we can basically immortalize all of the icons of the past, learn physics from Albert Einstein as an AR avatar, who you can have a one-on-one AMA session with to learn, or even Jane Goodall, we can immortalize her and bring people into the Congo, or to the natural habitat of the chimpanzee, where she can actually talk to us about the importance of preserving them and about what she learned about humanity through her many studies of the chimpanzee. There are all these aspects of our culture that we need to highlight, and we need to preserve, we need to enhance, because education is becoming experiential, and it's becoming an immersive experience now. So and of course, health and wellness, and giving people access to family doctor consultations in the metaverse, and also health and wellness therapies. Therapists. Mental health is probably one of the biggest issues for our young generation. Generation Z and millennials are the most depressed and lonely generation of all of human history, despite the fact that we are, connected more than ever digitally. We think that we have lost a sense of our humanity, and I think that the technologies that we use are highly disruptive and bad for our mental health. Relentless distraction of digital technology is a problem, which is why I created that installation in Times Square. So I think that offering these low cost or free DAO-based mental health projects in the metaverse is very, very important. And the thing is, when you talk about raising $100 million, I think that you can even look to DAOs in the community to support these kinds of projects too. So it's very exciting because we can really use the metaverse to uplift our culture, uplift our humanity, and add value to people's lives.
That is really interesting that you say it that way. We could make like $100 million DAO, right? Dedicated to here's this topic, like Krista is doing or Pico is doing, and everyone can be like, "Hey, I agree with that. That's really cool. I'm going to put my money in that." So that's actually a really cool way to look at it, because DAOs are basically organizations without borders, so anyone can participate and anyone could really drive it forward. So I think that's really, really cool. Vinci, what are your thoughts? If we gave you $100 million, no strings attached, what would you work on?
I just want to say, really value what Pico and Krista have to say. They're two incredibly inspiring women doing amazing things in this space. So shout out to both of them. I really agree with what they both said. I guess what I can add is like just something that's very close to my heart, which is the imagination and storytelling, and how it can be really therapeutic and also translate to in real life good deeds. And I feel like, that's the promise of the metaverse as well. You can defy physics, be imaginative as you want, and create culture and create community. So if I had $100 million, it'd almost be like, when I grew up, I would go to these theme parks, like whatever, Disneyland, but, you couldn't build it. Like you'd get to experience it. But could you imagine like giving it to the community where they could co-create and build these imaginative experiences in their own stories that inspires them and, leads to, good deeds, and really like centers around what both Pico and Krista were saying. It can be educational. It's all about human-centric as well. And the power of the imagination. It's like that Disney movie Tomorrowland. It's like, which wolf will you feed, the good or the bad wolf? And I think there's like this cute little kid in that movie, and he takes his little invention to the science fair, and it's a jetpack. And he's like, what good is that for? And he goes, well, like, if I saw a kid flying in the sky with a jetpack, that would inspire me. Wouldn't that be enough? And so, I mean, that's, I guess, what I feel like I personally want to bring to this space as well, is the imagination, and then inspiring other people to inspire themselves to create amazing things. And yeah.
Oh gosh, that's amazing. So education, culture, imagination. I really like that all three of you really focus on the human element, which I think everyone always tends to forget when we're always so hyper-focused on technology. We forget why we're doing it and how it's actually going to affect people. We just really focus on the algorithms, the code, how we're assembling it. And I understand why that is. It's really hard to do. So sometimes you got to dive deep. But it's really good that the creators of the future are remembering why we're doing it, remembering the human element, what's up here and what's in here. And I think without that, gosh, we would be absolutely lost. So I mean, I guess that should wrap it up, actually. I think it's been absolutely lovely just hearing everyone's thoughts about it. And I think we're all better off for it. And I think it's going to influence everything that we do, all the projects that we're working on. We kind of have the opportunity to learn from each other. It's been absolutely wonderful. So basically, if we had to summarize the future of Web 3.0 from everything that has been said here today, it's not going to be easy, right? I think we can all agree it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it, because from education to mental health to just the experiences that we want to live in from day to day, it's all going to be very impactful to us and our daily lives. So yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing. A little bit scary, but worth pursuing, right? So is there any final thoughts anyone would like to add before we sign off?
Let's build the metaverse for humanity first.
I like that. That's actually perfect. It's really short and sweet. That's going to be somebody's slogan, I bet. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for coming. And I suppose we can call it here. So bye-bye.
Awesome.